Welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Security Testing, the podcast where we talk all things security testing. In the last few weeks, I feel like you'd have to be living under a rock to not have heard about Anthropic's big, shiny new code scanning tool. So, I think in keeping with that, it would be remiss of us not to chat about it on the security testing pod. So, Tom, I presume you've seen this.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, so Anthropic announced a few weeks ago that application security was a solved problem, right? That we.
Sorry to hear that. What do you do for work now?
Well, I'm going back and hopefully McDonald's will take me on the second try round.
Yeah.
But no, so yeah, Anthropic have realized largely what a lot of people have already been using large language models for a while, which is that they are capable of doing some code analysis, effectively similar to SAST, right? Except that these more modern reasoning models are able to do things like actually figure out vulnerabilities that traditional rules-based scanners weren't able to find. And it's looking quite interesting at the moment. I don't know what have you really seen? What are people talking about with it?
Look, there was about a day, I think, wasn't there, where the markets had a tiz, and there was an outcry from, I think, people watching the space from the sidelines. I don't think anyone in the space was just like another eye roll moment. This is significant, right? Don't get me wrong. We are heading in absolutely the right direction, and it seems like everyone's trying to solve the actual problem, which I think has not been the case for so long. But at the same time, Google released kind of the same thing 4 months ago. Obviously, OpenAI have had Aardvark out now for some time. Now, I'm not saying all of these are got exactly the same capability, but this does stink of marketing, and particularly the hype and the amazement of it, which I think is the first thing to cover off. I don't know about you, but I'm getting WhatsApps from people. Have you seen this? Are you sure this is? Are you okay? And I think just to cover that off, I think there is a lot of Anthropic marketing going on within this.
Yeah. Well, so today I think it was that Anthropic announced their AI code review capability, right? It is almost the exact same announcement, almost word for word, written the exact same, with almost the exact same product promotional video showing you almost the same workflow to perform a different function. I think that they're using the same underlying frontier model. Maybe it might be fine-tuned a little bit to a specific use case. But I think what these vendors have realized is that there are broad use cases for these models, and they can just kind of do this boilerplate. This is a thing that it can do. This is a thing that it can do. Not necessarily because they focused on actually building a thing to do that, but because they realize that's a thing that their audience seems to like to use this technology to try and solve problems for. One of the things that is interesting about this, though, or even about any of the applications that we've seen, is my experience of using AI SAST is that it is pretty good, but it does have limitations in particularly large code bases, but more so in cost, right, associated with it. So it's not solved the AppSec problem entirely if it's going to cost you way, way, way more than the traditional incumbents to actually be able to run. So I think when the market realized that, it's kind of settled down a little bit, and people have taken a step back and said, hang on, is this a replacement for what we've already got, or is this just another thing that we can also do and complement our existing tool set?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And look, I think from an AI perspective, this tooling has existed for a while with platforms built on top of the models. I guess it'd be good to get your take on what are the benefits and drawbacks of having a solution like this baked into the same tool. And if we take, I know these frontier models are also used within tools like Cursor, where there are kind of also wrappers around an LLM. But let's presume the developers are coding in Claude Code, and then they're using Claude's security review tool to do the analysis. Like, what are the benefits of this, like, almost like closed loop system for doing this work versus the standard way of doing this, which is multi technology?
So I think the main benefit to taking this kind of an approach from a organizational perspective is adoption, right? People, a lot of developers. If you try and bring in a capability into the business and a new software stack and a new thing that everybody needs to learn how to do, and you need to get onto your preferred suppliers list, and you need to onboard, and you need to do your due diligence around, and you need to do the 1,001 things it takes to get a new piece of technology in, particularly at an enterprise level, you're going to come up against a lot of resistance. I think what's really exciting about this from an organization's perspective is the fact that they've onboarded this one technology and now they're finding that it's rapidly expanding use cases right across the business. The counterpoint to that is, I've seen people talking about it marking its own homework, right? Which is that if you are just using a single technology, it is to some extent a single point of failure. It is a thing that if it's not particularly good at something, it's likely not particularly good at, like, if it's not particularly good, if you're vibe coding an application and it's not great at preventing cross-site scripting in that application, and I'm not saying Claude is bad at that specifically, but for example, then reasonably it's likely to not be particularly good at finding cross-site scripting in an application. So I think there are questions about whether or not this single unified capability is a risk or a opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, and and a lot of credence goes to this idea of logic, right? I don't think we've ever heard more vendors talking about business logic flaws than we have done in 2026 so far. It seems like the new buzzword to understand whether something is effectively agentic or not. But business logic flaws are not like injection-based vulnerabilities or input validation-based vulnerabilities. They're obviously much more complex. A sort of simple bowler or something similar, I guess you could kind of almost put in that bucket. But some of the vulnerabilities we're talking about here require, real thinking about how a system's supposed to behave. I often reference the big vulnerability that was there for years sat in between Facebook and Instagram. I think the person that found this got paid an absolute fortune. It was a big bug bounty at the time. And they're effectively able to manipulate the way that Facebook was connected to Instagram through a sort of reset password type process and overtake an account. You're the technical one of the pair of us on this podcast. Help me try and understand, a business logic flaw can live in a system forever and never be found, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that might never be a problem because it might just be that hard to find. Help me understand, when we talk about being able to find business logic flaws, like, is that a statement you can actually make?
Well, so business logic flaws to some extent is a bit of an umbrella term, right, to encapsulate lots of vulnerabilities that don't fit into other categories of vulnerabilities. So some of them are more kind of textbook examples. If you've got an ordering system, you almost certainly should never be able to order minus a number of items. That's a classic example of a logic flaw, and something that that anything with the capacity for reasoning could figure out, and therefore these models can also figure out. But another kind of a business logic flaw is when you're filling out a form. Sometimes you get forms where you say, yes, I would like to, or yes, I'd like to opt into this thing. No, I wouldn't like to opt into that thing. And if you fill out the information in a certain way, you should be taken through a certain flow and certain questions. If you fill out the form in a different way, you get taken through different flows and different questions. Banking's a good example, right? Or loans, where you're not supposed to be able to complete the application if you answer certain questions and you don't pass affordability. It can be a business logic flaw if somebody is able to bypass those controls, and even though they can't meet the affordability criteria, still take out a loan. Now that's the kind of flaw that's really, really hard to find, not just because you can't find it with rules, like rules-based scanning and traditional tech, but because even if you kind of understand how the system operates, you actually need to understand that business's requirements. You need to understand that that business has an affordability cap that says if you earn under X amount of money per year, you cannot have more than Y amount of money in loans. And then you need to figure out a way that you can bypass that control, i.e., you can call a later form in the process, even though you've not completed an earlier form in that process. So, you know, I would say that when you get into those kinds of things, whether or not something even counts as a vulnerability, being a business logic flaw becomes much, much more complex to answer. And so, what our expectations can be about whether these technologies are capable of finding them needs to be adjusted a little bit by what our expectations of whether or not it's even the responsibility of a tool to find those versus the responsibility of a UAT functional tester to get maybe a little bit more technical and hands-on when they're trying to validate that the quality of the software is high enough. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it certainly does. It certainly does. And how does this fit in the broader landscape? So if you've got, are we heading into a world where application security teams will inevitably have far fewer tools than we've historically had? Are we going to get more of that sort of consolidation into a tool, do you think? Or do you think we're going to continue having specialist things for specialist reasons?
I think we will probably find ourselves in a situation, we probably will have less tools. I would say, that, like I say, there is some consolidation going on where these large vendors that produce the frontier models are recognizing the most popular use cases for them, be that in the case of Claude Code Review or writing code or secure like AI agentic SAST. And so there'll be some consolidation, but I suspect what we'll also find ourselves in is a situation where we are buying a lot of wrappers for these frontier models because we've got niche use cases about the way we need to integrate them into our business. And so that's in itself going to be quite a big business. The underlying model is the same, the underlying technology is the same, but the fact that we need to connect X with Y in order to make the best use of that model is a key fundamental of why we're buying the tool. So I don't think that we're going to find ourselves in a situation where they're entirely monopolized. And the other thing as well is these models are competing against each other and are relatively comparative in what they do, right? So I think that doesn't restrict them; it incentivizes competition between them. But if we look at Anthropic versus OpenAI, the other big thing that Anthropic's been in the news for recently is that they came out and said, no, we are not going to let the US government or Department of War use our models to do autonomous drones and spy on the American people. And a few days later, OpenAI came out and said, we've got a big contract with the Department of War. It's pretty strong evidence in that actually, if you don't just have to be locked into one of these models, you can switch one out for another one pretty much at the drop of a hat because they're that versatile but comparable in capabilities.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And it brings me, I guess, to an interesting game that I was going to play with you to try and get you to build your own AppSec program in 2026. So your budget is a fairly unrealistic $10. The
Not
audience,
that unrealistic for a lot of
Well,
AppSec
yeah.
programs.
The audience will have to stay with me a bit on this, but Tom has got $10 to spend. Now, I know I do this sometimes where I forget that there's people watching and then just people listening. I'll try and explain this really clearly. Tom's got $10 to spend. I've broken application security for the simplicity of this into 4 categories. Those categories are testing, vulnerability management, your dev team, and secure by design. And you can buy one thing from each category. Or we might say, let's say the other things kind of come baked in, potentially. Each thing either costs $1, $2, $3, or $4. So the idea here, if anyone's not heard this done before, is if Tom bought the most expensive thing of each one, he'd have spent $16 and he'd be over budget. So try and keep within the budget, Tom. And are you ready for your first category?
Can I ask questions as we go along? Clarifying.
Of course you can. Yeah, this is a lot of money you're spending here. We can have a good conversation about it. So the first category is testing, something I know is close to your own heart. So for $1, you can have a vulnerability disclosure program, and that's it. For $2, you can have a bug bounty program, so some actual testing going on. For $3, you can have some code scanning going on in the pipeline. Maybe the Anthropic tool, you've got your eye on that if you think it's cool. You can have that. For $4, you can have continuous testing driven by code changes.
Okay, and who am I in this situation? Sorry, just clarify for me.
You're the big cheese. You've got the AppSec budget overall, meaning that all spend goes through you, so nothing's getting bought by anybody else. But you're carrying the can when the software gets popped.
But yeah, I guess my question is...
You'll probably never get a job in security again if you get this wrong.
So my job is AppSec specifically, yeah, okay.
100%. Yeah. You don't have to this isn't like team lunches and stuff, and other areas of security are paid for with a separate budget.
Yeah. So, so VDP, bug bounty, pipeline, scanning, and continuous pen testing.
Yeah, and for this category, what I will give you is I'll give you all of the previous ones with the level up.
Sorry.
So you can have a VDP. You can have a bug bounty and a VDP.
Right.
You can have code scanning and a bug bounty and a VDP. So you're not sacrificing one for the other. If you pay the big money, you can have a bulk services.
And what am I protecting? What is this thing?
Critical software, mate. People will die if you get this wrong.
Right, but is it public facing? Is it internal? What's the?
Yeah, it's public facing.
Okay.
It's life-threatening information publicly available on the internet.
Okay. Last question then. 'Cause I'm conscious I could ask you 1,000 more, but who's building it? Like, what? Tell me a little bit about the team that's building it.
You're gonna pick your dev team later.
Right. Because that's
a little teaser into a later category.
Well, because that's an interesting point, right?
If you plan to invest heavily in a good AppSec team later, as a bit of a clue, you could maybe go a bit lighter on the test.
Well, this is what I was wondering is the, if I've got highly experienced security champions installed within that team and a depth of knowledge, then I probably would go a bit lighter. But in my experience, with the knowledge that I have of the capabilities of automated detection tools so far, and that's with the caveat that I'm sure they're going to get better, but where they are at the moment, I don't think I can put my faith in not having at least some aspect of manual testing there to cover over the gaps. Now, I'm biased. I've got a pen testing background, but I think I am going to have to go with continuous testing and go straight in with the big money.
Yeah, so you're going to get continuous testing driven by code change. You're going to get code scanning in the pipeline. You're going to get bug bounty, and you're going to get VDP. You're a walking door of compliance right now. This is.
But you said it's life or death.
Yeah, that's $4 though.
$4, and remind me,
you got $6 left.
I've got $6 left. Okay.
Might have to be a $1 option might have to come in.
Do I have to buy all 4 categories?
Yeah. No, you have to buy all 4 categories, and right. You and you can't go back. No takesies, backsies.
Right. Okay.
That budget's been spent now. You've
Yeah.
signed the PO.
Yeah.
Now, next thing is vulnerability management. So you've got, I think it's fair to say, a lot of visibility.
Yep.
You need to do something about it. So for $1, you can have spreadsheet tracking.
Mm.
For $2, you can have it implemented into Jira or whatever ticketing system you wish. So we're not on spreadsheets. For $3, you can have a proper vulnerability management platform.
Mm-hmm.
For $4, you can have risk-based prioritization and exposure analysis.
How many vulnerabilities are we talking
With all
about?
that visibility, mate,
well,
you're going to have a lot of false positives as well, I'm afraid.
Well, possibly. I mean, it depends, right? More modern AI SaaS. One thing it does definitely do is have a much lower false positive rate, and the continuous testing. I would expect to some extent to own validation of a lot of the findings that have come through from the other things.
0% false positives, I heard.
Yeah, exactly. So 0% is a brave statement, but
something I heard.
I'm expecting that through that testing capability we can funnel the other results, and therefore I should expect a fairly concise set of vulnerabilities. My question is more, how legacy is this estate? What's the size of it?
I think it's fair to say that this is massive. There's a bit of legacy, a lot of modern, a lot of legacy becoming modern.
Okay, so what are my options again? So Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
A
Jira tickets. Vulnerability management platform, or risk-based prioritization and exposure analysis.
I think, given the level of refinement that I'd expect the vulnerabilities to have gone through the testing program, and I'm hoping the level of maturity that I can invest in, a slightly higher level of maturity I can invest in my dev team later down the line, or I'm not clear exactly what you're going to offer me there. I'm leaning towards a spreadsheet.
Wow. I was not expecting that.
I love a spreadsheet, though.
Yeah, I know you do. That might actually be... Yeah, but you might be one of them bosses that likes a spreadsheet, but nobody else likes you for liking a spreadsheet.
That is possible.
Yeah, very true. Fine, we have spreadsheet tracking. Right, number 3 is your dev team. Now, this is quite the range. The $1 option might not seem so appealing. So the point of this, I think, is just to talk about, I guess, what sort of involvement you have within the development function. So for $1, you can have a CTO that does not believe in cybersecurity. It's a bit of a blanket statement, but I think the listeners will understand. You have a CTO that just doesn't believe in it.
Mm-hmm.
Just thinks it's voodoo and actually just all a bit of a fugazi.
Understood.
For $2, you can have secure coding training going into the development team. I'm not sure on the impact of that, but it's happening, and it's OWASP training as well. For $3, you can have a security champions program. Great. Members of the development team putting their hands up to say, we would like to be security champions within our team. Mm-hmm. For $4, you can have a dedicated AppSec engineer on every team. So you can have payroll members of your team installed into the dev team, working with the champions or being the champions, whatever.
Okay, and remind me what the final... So I've spent $5 so far, and I'm halfway through my decisions, right? I've got two more. Got 2 more to do. I've got $5 to spend. And remind me what the last category is going to be.
I'm not at liberty to say.
I swear you told me at the start. Okay. So this CTO, they don't believe in cybersecurity, but
basically, I think the point is they're just going to be really, really hard to work with.
They are.
You're not going to get much access.
I can't convince them, for example. I can't show them all of this brilliant output, beautifully curated in a spreadsheet from a series of reliable sources of testing, and therefore demonstrate to them the value through all of that.
I mean, look, you could try, but you're probably going to get them like 0 to 1. I don't think they're going to be rolling out the red carpet for you. Nor do I think they're going to be fixing your stuff in any way quicker than other things they're doing. So,
Okay.
this is going to be a career-long battle if you're up for it.
And the training, it's a one-time training.
Continuous
Training tailored to the vulnerabilities.
Whatever you think, yeah. But it's just training. You're not allowed a champions program. The CTO said no to that. There is team. They're not going to be spending any time, sitting in champions meetings or doing any of that stuff. But you can train them, let's say maximum weekly.
Okay. And the security champion.
Yeah.
Explain to me your view, what the difference is between the security champion and the dedicated AppSec person in knowledge, capability.
So a champion is ultimately a dev that has an interest in security,
Mhm.
and they put their hand up to basically be a messenger, to be someone that can understand the vision of the security team, understand what the security team expects of the AppSec team, of the dev team, and can transfer that message and effectively be a point of contact for the dev team, the first point of contact for security questions for the dev team, and they'll become, effectively accomplished application security people, I suspect, over a period of time. But ultimately, their goal is to be a security champion. An AppSec person would probably come with a development background, has already transitioned into application security, deeply understands how to fix, how to remediate. I'll give you that as well. Because they're installed into the dev team, they'll actually do remediation.
Mhm.
They'll get their hands on the coding tools and actually remediate stuff for you. That'd be a big difference.
And for this category, I'm also getting everything before that, right? So I'm getting the CTO. I'm getting the.
Yeah, I mean, you probably don't want the CTO.
But this is what I was wondering.
You can have the other stuff that you want. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to take the CTO.
I think if I'm getting weekly training, do I really need the champion? Is the question, right? Because
gambling on the last category here.
Well, yeah. I mean, not knowing what that category is makes this a lot more challenging. Because instinctively I want to install the champion. I don't think that. I think that there is a benefit to getting the actual development team engaged and involved to some extent. I also think that having a dedicated AppSec person, you can always lean on the continuous testing provider to some extent for support with that. So I think the difference between a security champion and a dedicated AppSec person probably isn't a 25% net benefit. Hard to say, but having said that, I then think if I've got that much face time with every single developer that I get to do weekly training with them, is there that much difference between a security champion and a developer that I can just teach why security matters to? I guess it then depends how much time those devs get to spend actually doing the remediation after the fact. No, do you know what? A security champion, I think, knowing that
that in straight away.
knowing that somebody owns remediation, because this is one of the hardest things, is dedicating somebody's time to remediation, right? You can find as many vulnerabilities as you want to, but having that person that actually knows, and that person that's familiar with that spreadsheet knows how to work their way around it, and therefore we don't need to worry about things being in Jira and all nice and all of that. Yeah, I think I don't want to force every dev onto that spreadsheet. I want one person to own it, be that point of contact, and security champion can do that.
Spreadsheet comes back.
$3.
Right, $3. Okay, so we've invested quite heavily in testing in a dev team. So the last category is design and build. So this is really about how security gets involved in the design process, or just what happens in that design process. I guess the logic here is ultimately how do we prevent stuff from happening in the first place, so the rest of it's meaningless, right?
Yep.
So for $1, you can have a security checklist. I have to just explain what I mean by some of these things. So a security checklist is literally just a paragraph of text that you have that lives potentially on a ticket that tells devs that no matter what they're building, whenever they're building it, they just have to follow these rules.
Okay.
For $2, you can have a system-wide threat model that's regularly updated, but it's system-wide. So that effectively, whenever they are building things, they have a document that tells them what is and isn't what the attack paths are, where the data flows to and from. They understand that. Well, I'm not sure they understand it, but it's documented properly. For $3, you can have periodic threat modeling workshops. So you can actually go in and do threat modeling workshops on a semi-regular basis. And for $4, you have threat modeling and secure design built into every change.
Well, obviously I can't have a $3 or $4. I've spent my money.
You can ask for a bit more budget potentially if you really think you need it.
Okay, well let's work these through then. So $1 was a
security checklist.
Security checklist. That security checklist, I mean,
it's meaningless. like a spreadsheet was supposed to be meaningless, but it's meaningless. It's a paragraph of text that applies blanket to every change that they'll just ignore.
Okay, so this isn't like the OWASP checklists, for example. So for the audience that aren't familiar, there's the Open Worldwide Application Security Project, probably the biggest AppSec project in the world, publishes a number of different checklists for different technologies and for different end users to help support people in doing reviews and considerations. It's really built to help guide developers, and it's quite cool, right? Because you can take a checklist if you are under certain conditions and work through that. But you're not talking about bespoke checklists for each type of change. You're talking about a single generic tick these 10 things to confirm that you've considered them, and we know everybody will just tick them whether they've considered them or not.
Yeah.
I mean, look, obviously, that's of no value at all. So $2 was a system-wide threat model. How regularly is this threat model updated?
It's constantly up to date.
Constantly
to the
up
best
to
of
date.
their capability. But you're not actually getting a FaceTime with them in workshops. They're basically committing to keeping it up to date themselves.
They being the development team. Yeah. The development team who receive regular training and have a security champion.
Yeah.
I feel relatively okay with that,
Yeah.
$3 was
periodic workshops.
Periodic workshops. Help me understand what the secure code training is constrained to if not periodic workshops on threat modeling.
Look, if you want to throw a bit of threat modeling into your secure code training, then I guess that is just, I don't think the CTO would like it, but I don't think he can stop you either. You've got that FaceTime with the devs.
Yeah.
If you were going to just start talking about something else and they were going to listen, I don't think he's going to bust through the door and stop the meeting.
Yep. And then
what is this threat modeling?
And then not that it means anything because unless I'm going to negotiate a higher budget. What was $4?
Threat modeling and secure design built into every change.
It sounds valuable, but as long as that security champion is engaged in that process, as long as that dev team understands the principles of threat modeling, as long as this information can be collected, aggregated, fed into the people that it matters to. So watch out, their morning stand-up, that security champion can say, hey, watch out for these things. The continuous testers can be told, hey, these are the kinds of things that we've threat modeled. I think, again, I'm okay with it. I think I'm going to stick with the $2 and be fairly comfortable. I've come in on budget this year and hopefully can push it up a little bit next year.
Nice. Well, there's your $10 spent. You happy with your AppSec program?
I am, yeah. I got a little bit nervous towards the end when I wasn't quite sure what the last category was going to be, but I don't think I'd change anything now I know.
No, I think you've got everything you need. You've got your continuous testing, you've got your spreadsheet for tracking the results, you've got the security champions program, and then you've got a system-wide threat model that you can use. So that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So I guess as we round up today, look, the point of this, yes, sure, it's a bit of fun. I hope you've enjoyed listening. But ultimately, these are very, very real conversations happening within businesses. Often things are a trade-off. You can really want something, but actually the other thing is just the better thing for the business right now. And very few people operate in a situation where they can just go for the top thing in every category. Very few businesses can do that. So if that's you, then fantastic. But I think for most people, these are real conversations happening every day. Anything to say before we finish off, Tom?
just obviously we spoke quite a lot about the technologies that are available today and our anticipations with things like these frontier models from Anthropic and OpenAI and so on and so forth. By the time this podcast comes out, there may already have been a next progression of realization of the kinds of things that it can be applied for. And in 6 months' time, when potentially some of our listeners are first listening to this, there may be even more things. I think it's quite an interesting time at the moment, and I wish I had a crystal ball that told me what was coming next. Unfortunately, I don't. But that does make it quite fun as we learn and develop as we go along and see what the future holds.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening in. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye now.